Well, this was a simple example, but it serves to segue into a couple of other methods that we can use in order to inherit or share sort of a structure between different classes. The next one that we're going to look at is called an interface. Okay, jump back to the resource pack directory and open up the 8th step, which is called converting to an interface. Go ahead and copy it and paste it over the code that's currently in your index.php file and save it. Now, in our previous example, we created a class that inherited from another class by using the extends keyword. In this context, that inheritance makes some sense. But there's two other structures that we can use in order to model things in a similar way. The first is called an interface, and the second is called an abstract class. So first we're going to look at an interface. Now, when I say interface, I mean something very specific to object-oriented programming and PHP. There's also the concept of a public interface, like an API, which is separate that we'll talk about here shortly. But this is very specifically an interface, which is a construct of PHP. Let's take a look at it in action and then explain what we're trying to do here. So I'm going to scroll up to this interface page here. So this is different. In the past, we've had classes. This is an interface. It's a little bit different. So an interface is like a scaffolding for a class. It doesn't include any logic. It just specifies what methods need to exist in the classes that inherit from it. The structure is pretty simple. We use the interface keyword, we give it a name just like we would a class, and we use an open bracket and a closing bracket to encapsulate everything inside. For the functions, instead of defining the full function, what we do is use the function keyword, the name of the function, the parentheses, and then a semicolon actually ending the line. And we do that for every function that classes inheriting from this interface or implementing this interface, as it's called, all of the methods that they must have. So now, instead of having page and printed page, we now have default page, and if we scroll down, we have printed page as well. I'm going to scroll back up again. Now, default page, which is what our page class was before, implements page. So implements means that we're using an interface rather than an existing class. So this implements page. And if we look at the code, it looks identical to what we had before. So no big changes here. But the difference is that this class, by implementing page, is required to implement all of the methods that exist in page. So it needs to have build, it needs to have theme. And so if we scroll down to our printed page, we see that this one also implements build and also implements theme. If either of these didn't implement those functions, then it would throw an error. So just to demonstrate this, what we'll do is go to the browser really quick, and let's refresh the page, and everything should look the same. But now if we go back to the editor, and we add a new function here, so we're going to add a function IDoNotExist, and this is a method that's not currently implemented by default page or by printed page. And let's save this, and then go back to the browser and refresh to see what happens. Okay, so it says fatal error, class default page contains one abstract method, and therefore must be declared abstract or implement the remaining methods. So it's saying that it needs to implement IDoNotExist in order to be functional. So this interface actually holds the developer accountable for creating a setup that follows certain structures. Now, most of the time as independent developers, we have a lot of leeway in how we structure our code. We can follow our own rules and do things our own way. But when it comes to supporting other developers or APIs, then it becomes much more important to be very explicit and specific about what it is that you're expecting from somebody else. And using an interface is a great way to say, I expect you to do these particular things. And in fact, any classes that you build that build on top of it and don't implement those methods are going to cause fatal errors. So you'll see this kind of structure implemented a lot in Drupal 8. And it just makes sure that people all follow the same set of rules, which makes adjusting things later on much, much easier.